We could spend a whole weekend on this, really, but we ain't got that sort of money at the moment. But I hope that in the future we can have bigger conferences, not just in London but elsewhere as well. But we need lots of cash. Now, we come to a point where I'm going to ask you to put succinct questions. Okay, so any questions to start with? Okay, at the back. Please announce who you are, what organisation you're from, etc.
Philip Foster from CIP. This is a quick query to Kelvin and to Brian from your perspective. Jeremy Corbyn is clearly a very interesting new leader, whatever your view. Any thoughts as to what effect that might have on the Labour's view of the EU?
If I can say, Jeremy and John, I mean, they've been in the rebel anti-EU lobby with me on every occasion. But the first thing that happened when Jeremy became leader was he was pressurised by the old pro-EU Blairite wing to say the one thing you've got to drop is any Euroscepticism. I haven't spoken to Jeremy about it, but that's clearly obviously what's happened, and he's now making sort of slightly pro-EU comments and speeches. I think in his heart he's not with them, but on the other hand he had to fight so many battles with people opposed to him. There's only about 20 MPs, I was the first to nominate him, only about 20 MPs actually actively supported Jeremy, and he's got mass support outside, deep hostility inside from the old Blairite wing. So he has a problem, and he chose to do it. But I don't think Jeremy and John McDonnell have the same analysis or perspective of the EU as I do. You know, their political origins are rather different from mine, and I think they have a much more they're less concerned about national democracies, which I think is fundamentally important. CIB I would support, but they may not do.
I'll just say something, John.
Yeah.
It was a really good question, and just from the grassroots end of it, I mean, for what it's worth, I've just joined the Labour Party for my sins, so I've come out, you know. I'm a member of this. I know a lot of fellows. I come from Southend, and the CLP in Southend has had 250 new members in the last 3 months. And the panel, the secretary and the chair, are in shock what to do with us all. And last Wednesday, funny enough, I went to my first CLP meeting, and it was packed with workers. It was really interesting. It was a lot of just working people there, and they just wouldn't join the Labour Party unless Jeremy Corbyn had been elected. And they're trying to sort of to help on a local grassroots level. But what was interesting was the agenda, because he said the chair said, "Well, I thought I'd do something political, so I feel like I should." And there was 2 items on the agenda. It was the trade union bill, which there was some trade unions there who knew about that, about the strangling of any sort of trade union rights in this country. And the second one was TTIP. And the chair, I made myself clear to the chair that I've done some work on TTIP. So can you lead off? Now, all this time, the prospective candidate was sitting behind me, horrified that this was going on. And this debate, and of course, when you talk about TTIP, you have to talk about the EU doing that to us. So it's the Commission doing it to us. And so I finished off saying, you know, this is what the Commission is going to do. And he carried on alarming behind me, but he ran out of steam pretty quickly, and everyone was going, TTIP and the EU are the same thing. So what I'm trying to say is, on the ground, there is this idea of coming together of ideas, and Jeremy Corbyn needs support. Jeremy Corbyn probably hasn't got the same view as what we've got, but TTIP and these elections has created a massive political space for a political debate that hasn't happened in the Labour Party for 20 years. And for 250 people to join is huge. And at the end of it, I suggested we done a leaflet on TTIP or something like that, and because they've got a photocopy out the back. And it was a general, yeah, let's do it and get out in the streets and do something. And so, as I say, our poor prospective candidate who supported Liz Kendall was absolutely horrified. So that's what's happening on the ground as far as I can see.
Right, Fran, go on.
Hello, my name is Fran Anderson Scott. I'm Just Democracy UK, as well as perhaps Mr TV. And what I was wanting to raise a question about is that some people say that if we got out of the EU, then Britain is only a small country now, so how the hell would we survive, either politically or economically? And I was wondering if somebody could perhaps try and counteract that fear that people have got, that if we left the EU, maybe we'd have to be more in bed with the Americans, because this is what a lot of people seem to be worrying about. Thanks.
Well, I think it's propaganda nonsense. The fact is, we've got a population of 60 million, we're the sixth biggest economy in the world. And of course, we have a gigantic trade deficit with the European Union, mainly with Germany. What Horst was saying, it's about German, the Euro and the EU are to, I think, underneath, are about supporting German manufacturing and sustaining their manufacturing exports, which we suffer from. So if we got out, and I think with an adjustment of our parity of our currency, we'd be better off out, actually, rather than inside. And I think many other countries in the European Union would also be better off out than they are inside.
Yes.
So I think it's just propaganda nonsense. And the idea that we're, I mean, not like Slovenia. Slovenia is a wonderful country, but it is rather small. You know, we are not quite in that situation. So I think it is something you just have to brush off as being laughable.
A question.
Stand up, please.
Sorry, my name's Mark Blendan from the Democracy Movement. It's fantastic to see people from other European countries here, because part of the major problem we face in this country is that we have lost the culture war, if you like, about this issue. So those of us who are critical of the European Union are perceived or presented as being motivated by xenophobic ideas and all the rest of it. It's kind of like a McCarthyite campaign. It's sort of racist, not so much under the bed, but on top of the bed.
Question, Mark.
Question.
Question.
Would you agree, it's a rhetorical question, that what we need is for people from other European countries to come to this country and to get actively involved in the campaign to show the people of Britain that in fact we are a genuinely pro-Europeanist, the authentically pro-Europeanist campaign. Last point in relation to the question that was first asked about, oh, we'd have to get more into bed with America. Well, what is the TTIPS treaty that's been negotiated by Brussels?
Exactly.
Yes. Right. Anybody else? Stuart.
I'm Stuart Delvin.
Stand up, please. Stand up.
I'm Stuart Delvin. I only represent myself. I'm part of. I joined John's organisation, and when I see these scenes on the television most nights, I just wonder, and I address it to anyone on the panel, but particularly the young lady, who is orchestrating this flow of people from Syria and around there to Europe? I mean, the average person can't do it. The average mini organisation can't do it. Somebody is orchestrating this.
There are people smugglers. There are active people smugglers at the moment. Who, for example, quite a few cell phones have been found by the refugees. These refugees are equipped with extremely modern cell phones. They have iPhones and all that stuff, and they have. There are people smugglers. These cell phones contain information that Slovenia is the best to go through to Germany, because we are such a small, poor country with such a small police and force and a small army, so that it would be a great burden for us to keep them inside, so we'd be forced to move them upwards to the Austrian border. And I have been told by people from the border that some of these people paid 13,000 euros to come to Europe, and these smugglers they take them. They are specific routes where to take them. There are also stories of people carrying 30,000 euros around their waist. I've been told this by people from the border. So these are organized smugglers and other people who are interested in moving people. So these are no longer refugees. In Slovenia, we call them migrants, because this is a mass movement. These are no longer people fleeing from Syria, as the Germans have this misconception that they're the Syrians. These are people from Iraq, anywhere. They're now seeing this open border and, let's go to Germany. But it's all organized. They all know where they're going, where they're headed, why they're there, what they have to answer. This is what the policeman told us. My boyfriend can tell you more because he was at the border. I've been told a bit of information. Yeah.
Patricia.
Patricia McKenna from Ireland. I have a question just, it probably goes back to the refugee crisis issue and how it would relate to your upcoming referendum. But first I just wanted to say it was great to hear Kelvin and Brian both speak, because I think for you there's a huge opportunity to reclaim the Labour Party from the kind of Europhile Tories who've more or less taken it over, right wing, whatever. And it is a great opportunity, and I think because one of the things that the EU critical movement has lacked has been the fact that the left have moved away, and just I'd say exactly for the reasons that Brian mentioned in relation to how they were sold a pub and they believed in it. But somebody just a couple of days ago, I heard that I was at a talk given by the British woman who's the Advocate General of the European Court of Justice, and she was asked the typical question about British exit. And she said, of course, well, you know, she couldn't comment on this, it wasn't her place, and she went on then to just mention, you know, but people should consider some issues. And one of the things she mentioned was the border, which is why I think it ties in with what Dora was talking about, the border between Ireland, the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland. And I think this is going to be a big issue for you in the upcoming referendum, because what they're going to try and do is say that, well, you know, if Britain exits the EU, you're going to have this border here, all these refugees that are flowing into Slovenia are now going to flow into Ireland and then flow up through Ireland into Northern Ireland and into the UK. You know, I mean, I just think it's a big issue, and they're going to actually use that. And I don't know, has this come up at all in the debate so far, because I think it was interesting, this is one of the things she mentioned, because it's something you can really sort of, you know, grasp it as a credible issue for their side, you know.
Okay. Any other queries? At the back. Mick. I'm sorry, I don't know everybody's name. I know some names, but Mick. Yeah, I know Mick.
It's just on this. I think it's important that the language is moved away from the refugee crisis. It's a humanitarian crisis. I don't think anyone would deny that. When somebody is moving to a country of choice from where they're already safe, they're a migrant. I think what's important for people to underline with it is it ties in with the entire austerity agenda across Europe. The European Commission yesterday said that it would have a small but positive effect on GDP growth in Europe by 0.2 to 0.3%. Now, it'll be an increase in population of 0.4%. So that's less GDP per capita across Europe. There's 3 million people fleeing now, an absolute nightmare, something I wouldn't wish on anybody. But the argument has to be moved away from it being a refugee crisis to a humanitarian one being exploited for the purposes of austerity. That's
Okay. Yeah.
Just briefly, first of all, I think it's important to have some analysis about, you know, remind everybody that the Labour Party used to be the Eurosceptic Party and the Conservative Party used to be the Euro-enthusiast Party, and it's switched round. And I tried to do some of the history in this pamphlet, you know, take 3 copies, take more than 1 copy each if you like, because we've got a few of these, and try to remind people about that, and especially for Labour Party. I mean, there are Labour MPs who've got no idea about a history of these matters. But what was Mick's point? Oh yeah, GDP. Well, I mean, it's very simple. You know, if you go back 40 years, I think over a period of 20 years, the Egyptian economy doubled in size, but the Egyptian population doubled in size as well. So no one was any better off. You know, so we have to be careful of statistics.
Robert.
Thank you. Robert Wilkinson, I'm a member of CAFE, and the trade union is against the European Union, but also a National Union of Teachers activist. Now, I think it was John. I don't know whether the rest of the panel can answer this question, but I think John asked a rhetorical question. What if 4.5 million people left Britain? Now, was it Kevin?
Kelvin.
Now, between 1815 and 1915, 5 million people left Britain. And on top of that, another 3 million people left Ireland, because they were counted separately, even though we were all part of the United Kingdom. Now, I don't think any country can afford a brain drain of that size, because it's the young, fit, intelligent, dynamic people that leave, that have got the sort of courage and the determination to move from one country where they don't see that they've got many prospects to another country where they identify that they've got better prospects. But the impact upon the country that they're leaving must be devastating, because that country has not just given birth to them, but raised them. It's an investment. Any country makes an investment in its young people. And therefore that investment is being taken by the country that they come from and given to another country that then benefits from it. But they benefit from it in such a way that because they don't have to pay for their upbringing, they can super exploit the migrants that arrive. They don't have to pay for their generation, if you like, for their investment that the society that has lost them has made. So I'd like you to answer that. What do you think is going to be the impact upon those countries that are losing those people? I mean, they say they're from Syria, but I think the data was only 20 to 25% of them are from Syria. What is the impact on Afghanistan, for instance, because quite a number of those refugees that claim to be Syrian are actually from Afghanistan.
Yeah.
What is going to be the impact on Afghanistan to lose those people? And what's the point of us taking those people and exploiting them when in fact, sorry to say this, and this might sound very brutal, they should be back home fighting against their own terrorists, their own Islamic State or Taliban or whatever they call it. They're running away from that conflict. They're deserters, and in some cases those Syrians are deserters from the National Army of Syria. And they went into the Free Syrian Army, and they deserted the Free Syrian Army because they didn't have enough courage or organisation to stand up against IS. So they deserted twice, and now they're coming to Europe and expecting us to take them.
Can I say about this? I've thought about this for a long time, and I do think that you mentioned Latvia. I mean, Latvia, vast proportion of their population, the young, the doctors. My optician, the young woman in my optician who gave me these glasses, she's Latvian, speaks beautiful English, highly educated, clearly left older parents behind in Latvia, and she's sending back remissions from Britain to keep her parents going in a poorer country. And those countries have been denuded of their most talented people. I think it's happening all over. And I think it's tragic. If you look at, it's my own theory again, you look at Iran, you look at Afghanistan, many of those countries where there was a big left, which were destroyed by the Islamism, with the connivance, I say, of the Americans. It was the left who tended to be the active trade unionists, the intelligentsia, the professionals, the doctors, even the middle class. All of those people were actively on the left, and there was a big left in Iran in particular, all left the country because they were being murdered by the Islamists. And the Americans were happy about that because it destroyed the possible danger of very rich oil countries becoming left-wing countries, and they did not want that. So it's a long story, but I do think you're absolutely right. Countries can be really undermined and very substantially weakened by emigration, and staying behind to make your country a better place is what people should do, even if it may be terrifying, and sometimes it is terrifying in those dreadful countries where you string people up or stone them to death or crucify them or whatever.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. I think that the free movement is a corporate agenda. But in this pamphlet we talk about years ago, in South Africa, the best doctors were taken to Western Europe through EU mechanisms. And there was a famous South African MP, ANC MP, said this is discreet imperialism. Where they were sucking away the best talented of South Africa were moving away, and you can take anywhere in the country. So free movement is a corporate agenda. And I see no borders campaigns well funded in this country. They don't come from the Labour movement, I don't know where they come from, but they're well funded campaigns, websites, no borders. And I think that the idea of no borders basically is corporate power as tightens its grip, creates chaos wherever it is, and obviously coherent political narratives are then sort of swept away, and we have this communalism that starts to develop. And but it is different from migration. Migration and free movement are two different things. People migrate to another country and they throw their lot in with, so I moved to Ireland, I'll throw my lot in with the Irish, but the idea of free movement is completely different from migration. It's moving backwards and forwards and undermining people's wages and national agreements. And that's why the trade union movement should be quite clear on it. Trade unions exist to constrict the supply of labour. That's the whole point of them. And Karl Marx was writing about this in the 1800s. But it was designed to stop scab labour being brought in, which were driving down wages. That's what it was for. But that narrative seems to be forgotten in the global narrative, global New World Order, where you no longer need independent trade unions. But I think what's interesting is that big unions like the GMB are actually moving quite quickly now. They've put a statement out this week against the Trading Services Agreement precisely because it does that. It brings in mode for shifting of labour from the third world to the developed world on third world wages. And the GMB are coming out and saying that, and it wouldn't surprise me if the GMB joined the RMT in saying we've got to get out because of the situation. Because I think this crisis will open more people's eyes, because the GMB are not doing that because they've suddenly the scales have fallen from their eyes. They're getting it from below because their members are saying we've been socially dumped. We haven't got work anymore, and it's going to get worse. And any sort of the previous GMB narrative was that, you know, Brussels will support us and get us through this. And that's not having any traction amongst the members of GMB anymore. And I think that's probably the same for Unite and Unison, who are getting the impact of this free movement process, which is undermining their wages and conditions.
Right, I'm going to bring this session to an end.